speaking with Miss Danielle Oser. Danielle has come to instructional design on a non-traditional path, starting as a PR agency accountant, then moving on to a corporate communications director, finally accidentally starting a career in higher ed. With her background in visual communication, adult learning, and digital media, she brings a unique perspective to the world of instructional design. Hi, Danielle. It's really great to have you here with us today.
It's great to be here.
How long have you been working in instructional design?
About 4 years ago, I was asked to convert some of my on-ground classes into online courses. So that's kind of how it began. It was really an interesting, eye-opening experience to take those 16-week in-person classes and turn them into those 8-week sessions.
I can imagine.
Especially because they were things like Adobe Photoshop and InDesign, which are very, very technical to begin with.
Right, definitely. Yeah, I saw that you were into a lot of Adobe.
Absolutely. When I went to school, most of the Adobe stuff wasn't really there yet. So I've really been very self-taught. So trying to figure out how to help others learn how to learn those, because Adobe is constantly changing and what you did yesterday might not be there tomorrow.
Right.
So how do we help learners know how to have that confidence to say, okay, let's try this. I want to try and do this instead. So it's kind of what brought me a little bit to the instructional design side.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really cool. What do you enjoy most about being an instructional designer?
Well, instructional design kind of happened accidentally, as my whole career in higher ed did. Did I have a clue what I was doing at the time? No, I knew I was a subject matter expert, but I didn't necessarily know how to convert that. So I did work with a team who did a lot of the back end parts to begin with. And how do we decide what stays, what goes? How do we keep the content similar enough so that people who are taking the on-ground aren't getting more or less than those people who are taking the online classes as well.
Right.
So I think part of that challenge is what's really interesting to me.
That's awesome. Can you describe a typical work day? What are your daily responsibilities?
I haven't had a typical day in 20 years.
No.
No. Well, it's everything from, like right now, I'm still teaching 2 online classes. So in that ebb and flow of grading and making sure those put together. And at the same time, what class am I building at the time? So really, I don't have anything typical. Plus, I had 2 boys who are now in college. So typical was anything from wrestling practice to Boy Scout meetings. So it was constantly moving. And that's why I got into this, is because I needed that flexibility. I needed to be able to go to the nurse's office and take people's braces apart. So yes, I actually had to do that with my little wire cutters. 2 amazing boys.
Oh.
So I love the flexibility. I love that it's always something different.
Right. And that's how the world is coming these days too. So it kind of fits perfectly.
Absolutely.
Just agile, continuous changing.
Absolutely. And I was teaching on ground when we all got locked down. So all of a sudden we went from being on spring break to, okay, we're going to switch you to this online client, but we've never used it before, being Zoom. And then it's, okay, we're not going to be here 2 weeks. We're going to be here for the rest of the semester. So what had been a lot of on ground, helping people, okay, where's this tool? How do I do this? Turned into okay, how do I convert what we usually do in class into this hybrid place? And so I really saw, as my kids were struggling, they were in high school, they're supposed to be taking AP exams, trying to figure out how we were moving into that online space really made me want to go in and see, okay, I need to know more about the education side of this. So I actually went back to school at that time to do a master's in education technology.
Okay. Wow.
So it really opened my eyes to see what I'd been doing, but giving it actual names.
Right. Yeah, I know. It was just after COVID happened, everything just changed. And I think everyone thought it was going to be temporary. And like you said, it's kind of necessary. And just it's crazy how things have changed in the last couple of years. And you had high school students. She was in 5th, 6th grade at the time, but and it was hard for her. Yeah, it's hard for all the kids, and it's our jobs to learn how to bridge that gap. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
My one son was taking home repairs, and they were supposed to be building sheetrock walls and running wires. And how do you convert that to the online world? And it was not super well done, because there wasn't a lot of time to put the thought into how do we make this work. And I
Yeah,
think
we didn't
that's
have
kind of where
time.
we are now, is kind of, okay, how can we take those experiences and make them work for other people?
And learn from all of it.
Absolutely.
How do you manage your time effectively? Speaking of,
I think that's hard, especially because I've been in kind of the teaching mode for so long, because there is such an ebb and flow. You know, assignments come in Sunday night and all of a sudden you've got 72 things to grade by Tuesday. So I think it's really kind of keeping an eye on what's due. I tell my students and my kids all the time, okay, don't freak out. Let's look at, okay, what's due next? What does the rubric say? What do you have to do to get the points? Let's get that done. And then you can add the bells and whistles from there. And I think that's the same with instructional design. You know, what do we need to have done? Okay, now how can we make it fancier? How do we make it cooler? How can we make it even better? Because I think we get so caught up in, ooh, this can be this, this, and that we don't meet those basic precedents that are required for the assignment. And, you know, even in corporate communication, I always start with, okay, so when is this due? Okay, if we only have 2 weeks, then that tells us quite a few things. We can't do all these photo shoots. We can't build custom sites. So what can we do with the time that we have available?
that's really good to keep in mind. Yeah. And staying ahead of the game, especially with so much coming in at us. Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
You have to always remember that. Do you have any strategies for finding employment or clients in this field?
I've been lucky in that I've been just picking up where I teach. So I haven't really had to go through that process just yet. I know having that network is key. It's still amazing to me how many people aren't using their LinkedIn, aren't using their social, aren't using the networks that they have, because they never know whose husband from the wrestling team is a recruiter or who is looking for something. So I think it's really a matter of going out there and saying, hey, this is what I do, and maybe I can help you do this. And that's hard. It's really hard, especially as a lot of designers are moving more and more into their home spaces. They forget there's other people out there. I find as I'm teaching my online classes, I constantly have to remind them that there's a person on the other side of the screen who's here to answer their questions, and you can pick up the phone and you can call me and I will answer your questions. But they really approach it as ooh, it's my computer class. And I think we have to really get over that hump, and we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, right. It's about the connections and networking, right? I agree. And we need to, yeah, I mean, continuously reaching out, but
Absolutely.
but going back to the question of helping or finding clients, I think you're right. It's all about LinkedIn and networking. And
Well, and I think it's also being willing to put something out there, because, you know, as I have students who are looking for internships, I'm like, well, go to your favorite nonprofit, look at their website. Is there something, you know, they're constantly looking for help. Can you say, hey, I would love to put together this social media campaign for you, and if so, can I put it in my portfolio?
Yeah, that's such a good point.
That's how you build those, you know, opportunities. If you don't have anything in your portfolio, then find someone who needs something, even if it's how-to videos on how to make stained glass, or, you know, some type of hobby. What can you teach someone, and how can you use those tools to show someone else that you can use those tools?
Yeah, I love that. That's great. We are blessed with our career, with our position, with having so many different options and opportunities to help other people. Yeah, I love
Absolutely.
that. What has been the biggest factor to your success?
Knowing that if I don't know it now, I can learn it by tomorrow. I mean, you constantly have to know that, you know, I have a degree in digital media, which at the time was a lot of social media, and social media changes every single day. So really being able to say, okay, this is what worked yesterday, but this might not be what works tomorrow. So how can I find the tools? How can I find the experts who can help me move this forward? Because I can't know it all.
Mm-hmm.
How can I find the person who this is their niche? How can I find a way to partner with them? How can I figure out how to do it on my own? And sometimes it is sitting down with an old-fashioned book and going page by page and pulling your hair out. And sometimes it's getting someone to show you how to do it. But I think it's getting over that fear of, oh, I couldn't possibly.
Yeah. Definitely realizing you can figure it out.
Absolutely.
Sure. What methods do you use to motivate yourself to continue working in this field? I
think if you think of it from project to project, there's always an end. So sometimes you get into that, oh, this is going to be really amazing. And then you go like, oh, crap, this is going to have work. And then you get to this, oh, wow, this is really a lot of work. But eventually you get to that, okay, this is coming together. And in the end, there'll be something that's done. So even if it's not perfect, I constantly have to remind clients and students that we can't let perfect stand in the way of done, because perfection is not going to work. Perfection is something we can try and attain, but we have to accept that sometimes this is what it is right now. But the beauty of this is it's electronic. We can change it tomorrow. If purple's not working, then let's make it green.
Yeah.
So how can we kind of keep thinking about how to make it better, but learn to accept what we've got right this second?
I love that. Just continuous iteration after iteration.
Absolutely.
Which professional associations do you belong to?
I'm still a member of the Public Relations Association. I'm actually accredited in PR because I think a huge part of what we do is public relations. It is how do we tell a story? It is how do we communicate? Because if we just putting something out there, if they don't act on it and they don't do it, then we haven't done our jobs. So sometimes acting on it is getting them to click. Sometimes acting is getting them to complete an assignment. So how do we use those communication skills? Because that's really all it is. It's psychology, it's persuasion. It's not necessarily the information that's on there. It's how are you getting them to go from one page to another? How are you getting them to keep paying attention to that video? And my son had to take a bunch of free training before he started college. One was about drinking or sexual abuse or one of those types of, things that incoming freshmen should know. And the survey afterward, I'm like, you can't write that. He's like, well, it was mind-numbingly dumb. I'm like, you can't do that. Like, how do we make it better? How, that's not how we can talk. How can you give them some ideas to what parts of it were awful? Was it too fake? Was it too staged? Were they not speaking your language? What about it wasn't working? Was it too long? So how do we take that feedback and constant evaluation to kind of help figure out where are we going to move next? How can we fix this? Because some of it is mind-numbingly awful. Yeah. We've all had to sit through those. How do we make it better? How do we, knowing that we've got to get this information out, how can we do it differently?
How do we raise the energy levels? And how do we learn from our mistakes and other people's mistakes so that we don't make them?
Absolutely. My recent master's was almost all online, and it was really interesting to see that a lot of what we were learning wasn't being necessarily applied to like the modules and things. And it was really frustrating to say, okay, you're telling us to do this, but you're not showing us that way. So why not? Why are you not taking the time to go back and adapt this? And I know it takes time. I know it takes money. I know it takes energy. And I think a lot of times, just as once you write the brochure, it's done, it's on the shelf, you're done, but you can't consider your online learning that way. It's constantly got to be refreshed.
Yeah.
And, one of the first classes I built was social media campaigns, which is a great online class, but it's not a sit on the shelf class because it's constantly moving. What you told them tools wise to use might not be there. Twitter's upside down right now. How do you teach them how do you put enough basic content in there without having to redo it all the time? That is hard and that's frustrating.
Going back to the iteration after just
absolutely
improvement.
I use for Adobe, I use what's called Classroom in a Book because that's what the school's decided. And it's great, except they've decided now to update that every year, which means I need to go back through and re-record all those tutorials. And by the time you're done with 13 chapters, that's 100 videos. And that takes a lot of time. And it is frustrating, especially when you're like, okay, you changed 4 words. Being willing to put that out there, I think is really important.
Well, too, one thing with like that particularly that I'm trying is to do more live. I don't know, that's just an idea. Instead of recording them all, do it live the first time and then just keep the recordings of the live.
Absolutely.
I just feel like because the world's becoming so fast paced.
No, I definitely agree. And I think there's some things that definitely that fits for.
Yeah, no, I know not everything, obviously. Yeah.
And you get, that way you also capture the energy in the room. You capture people's actual responses. It's not someone talking to a screen.
Yeah, definitely.
A big difference.
What book would you recommend to new and aspiring instructional designers?
I think read everything, but there's not necessarily one book because books take a long time to get printed. So it's keeping up with blogs. It's keeping up with industry news. There's tons and tons of stuff about how to tell stories. There's a great one by Cialdini, which is the Influence and Persuasion. That's not the exact name of it, but it's all about how the psychology of making decisions and how do we persuade people. And though it's not necessarily a instructional design book, I think it's really important to understand how do we move people from point A to point B and how do we push their buttons. So I think influence is really a good one.
Yeah, that sounds, I want to look into that book.
Yeah, it is. There's a great short video on YouTube, like the 6 steps to persuasion or something. It looks like a whiteboard type of video, but it's pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Oh, okay. Well, is there any, I guess that was the last question.
Okay.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that we have not covered?
I just think constantly be looking, constantly be curious, join Facebook groups, join, those professional associations, use that LinkedIn. You're never going to be able to keep track of all of it all at once. So how can you use those other tools? After I made the jillion videos for my classes, I actually put them out on Facebook or on YouTube just because it was a place to host them. And I find that almost every day I get someone who says, hey, thanks for putting this out here. I was really confused about how to do this. So no, I'm not trying to monetize, but I've got 100 and something videos out there if you want to learn how to create some more interesting visual communication. If you're trying to play with Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator, because I think the visual communication part is really, really huge. Don't necessarily get as much training in that as we need to. Instructional design really hinges on it. So how do we make it better? How do we communicate in ways that are appealing, that are going to catch your attention?
That's great. I'm glad that you shared that about your videos. I was going to ask if you minded sharing some information about your free gift with the audience. I think they'd really like to hear more about it.
Yeah, anything, everything. Yeah. I've got step-by-step that follow the classroom in a book. I've also got quite a few that do, maybe you want to be able to add a picture to a image. Maybe you want to learn how to create a really cool logo or create some social media posts in Canva. If you go to my YouTube channel, there's quite a few different options out there depending on what you're trying to learn. Everything from even little things like trying to put your face on a milk carton. I do have it's one of my most popular videos is how to use the vanishing point in Photoshop. And I only made them for my class, but at the same time I said, okay, well, this is something that other people can use. And I do find that they get a lot of attention. So check it out.
Yeah, that's great.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for sharing. Your story is going to be so helpful for new and aspiring instructional designers. And thank you for sharing with us. I hope that you have a wonderful day.
I will. Happy to be here.